Welcome to another episode of Purchase to Profits. I'm Seth Ferguson. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our daily interviews with successful real estate investors. And I've put together the top 7 key market drivers I look at when analyzing a real estate market. Go to sethferguson.org to download your free copy. Our guest today bought his first property in 2011 and has invested in over 2,000 apartment units. He was able to leave his job at age 49 and become a full-time entrepreneur. Steeve Breton joins us today. Steve, welcome to Purchase to Profits. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks very much, Seth. Pleasure to be here.
We're really looking forward to this, especially since we're able to use real estate and leave your job, which is always an exciting thing to happen, right?
Right. Yeah, it's very new for me. It just happened a couple months ago. So
yeah. Oh, that's super exciting, and we'll talk a lot about that. So I guess this might fit into it. What are your real estate goals right now, and where do you want to take real estate?
So it's funny because I had all these big goals, right? And one of them was to leave the job and you become more financially independent and have that time freedom that people talk about. And I've achieved it for the most part at this point. And now it's like, well, what's next? Should I grow this thing into some giant company? So I'm going through this process right now of just sort of discovering what do I want to be when I grow up or in my next life, or however you want to put that. So what I determined was for the last month and a half or so, or 2 months now, I wanted to enjoy the summer, enjoy my kids while they were home. One of my oldest son was home from college. Other 2 boys are in high school. So just wanted to really enjoy it, still be active and working, but not trying to kill myself growing this massive business. I figured I'll take the fall to kind of figure that stuff out and decide where I'm going.
Yeah. And at what point did you know it was the right time, if it was the right time to leave your job? Like, what signals were there for you?
So I invested for a while, and we'll get into the history a bit, but what happened is I got into syndication as a passive investor, eventually got into being more active, and then became very active as a general partner, doing different projects around the country, raising capital. And I felt like I owed it to my investors to really keep an eye on the ball, to ensure that all the commitments I've made to date in terms of making sure projects are going well and all that sort of thing, investors are getting the returns that we had projected. In order to do that, it takes a fair amount of time. And I was to the point where I was working almost as much in my real estate job or my real estate life now compared to what I was doing at work. And I felt it was starting to have an impact at work. Fortunately, when I did give notice, so I knew in December, end of last year, that I wasn't going to make it through the whole year. And then I just started looking, and it looked like maybe summertime was the right time to go. When I gave notice, everybody was shocked. They were all surprised. They didn't have a clue that I was doing this thing on the side. So I guess I did a good job in the end of providing value at work and still having a good balance there.
Yeah, and a lot of people end up in the position where you were, where real estate's doing really well, and then they're still working at their job, and it's a scary thing for a lot of people to pull the plug and actually jump into real estate full time. So, what sort of things did you do? Maybe about how you thought about it, or active things that you did to prepare yourself for the eventual jump?
That's actually a good point. So, a lot of people think that you become a syndicator and a couple of years in, you've done all these deals, you just go and leave your job. And maybe you can if you're really pushing it hard and it's in a great market. I think we're a little bit toppy in the market right now, so I don't want to be buying 1,000 units a year. What I did was, aside from the smaller portfolio that I have of duplexes and triplexes in my local market, I started to invest passively because I didn't want to be a landlord on 60 units while I was still trying to do a day job and raise my kids and be a good husband. So I started to invest passively in syndications, and literally everything that we made that we didn't have to live on. And my wife has a good income as well, so we try to live on one income and sock away everything else in passive real estate. I stopped putting money into my 401k because I wanted that cash flow. I knew I was going to need it in a couple of years or a few years. So, the prep that I did was basically earn, invest, repeat over and over and over for years, right? We didn't take fancy vacations. I still have a 12-year-old Volvo. 10-year-old Honda Pilot. I drive a pickup truck. And it works for us. We still took vacations. We still have a great time. It's just we weren't spending as much as others, to the point where we were able to have this sizable nest egg, most of it invested in real estate, producing great cash flow. And that's what gave me the freedom to really go and leave the job and be comfortable with the cash flow that I have, and just the knowledge that I can continue to grow it.
Yeah. And you mentioned you had some duplexes. What initially got you into acquiring those duplexes and smaller residential properties?
So I took a very traditional path. I went to college, studied computer science, was a programmer for a little while, eventually went and got my MBA, and then was more into sort of the finance and management of IT for 25 years. And had a great trajectory, loved my career, thought I might be a CIO at some point, Chief Information Officer. And then our company, I was working for a smaller biotech. We got bought out by a pharmaceutical company. And things got a little weird, and we had to lay people off. And in that time frame, I started thinking to myself, do I really want to keep my ladder against this wall, climb that corporate ladder, keep going, and knowing that I could get laid off at any time? I was starting to think about, it was right after, or a few years after '08, so 2011. I was concerned about my retirement savings, concerned would I ever be able to retire? So all those thoughts just led me to somehow think that buying a triplex was a good idea. And I did a bunch of research, and I was kind of stuck in my analysis paralysis, but eventually just literally pulled the trigger. I didn't really know what I was doing, but it was just a triplex. Wasn't putting anyone else's money at risk. It was just my money. Go out, and I'm handy enough. I figured it would be fine.
Yeah,
and it was. It was actually enjoyable, and it cash flowed really well. So I did well out of the gate. Learned a bunch from that one, and then just kept buying. Every year I'd buy one or two more properties, and just continue to build that cash flow engine.
Yeah, and at what point then was it time to move into passively investing in larger commercial deals? Because those are two different animals.
Very different. So it was really the pain of landlording. So I live in Boston, so the market here is pretty pricey. It's hard to get a property to cash flow if you're hiring a property management company. And because I'm buying right in my backyard and I have the curse of being handy, I have a really hard time paying other people to do things that I can do. So I was up to 16 units. I was still growing, thinking, okay, I'll get to 30 or 40. And, at some point I can just leave my job. And at 16 units, I started to feel like there's no way I'm going to be able to double this in the next 2 or 3 years and work and raise my 3 kids. I was coaching hockey and soccer, and I didn't want to give those things up either. I was still playing hockey and soccer as well. So I decided 16 is good, and I somehow was introduced to a syndicator and did my first passive limited partner investment. And it also turned out well. It was a referral, so it was a well-trusted person with lots of experience. Worked out very well, and then I invested with them a couple more times, and then with several other folks as well.
Yeah, and now on the GP side, so you're a lot more weighted on the general partner side. What would you say is your biggest challenge right now in your business?
At the moment, it's probably finding really good deals. I was blessed in my first few deals to have really good deals. They cash flow extraordinarily well. They're exceeding expectations. I just closed on another one not too long ago, which is the same. I think we're going to blow the numbers out of the water on it, but it's not easy to find. We're looking at myself and my partners together, probably 100 deals, make an offer on 10 of them because only 10 of those 100 were even decent. And on the ones we make an offer on, we get the best and final, and we're not willing to keep pushing up our price, so we end up backing out of the deal.
Yeah.
It's not easy. Everyone's kind of suffering through the same thing in terms of finding something that's really going to work well in a market that's as hot as it is right now.
Yeah. And, when you're in those competitive situations, it's really easy just to tweak the spreadsheet to make it look better on paper. What sort of things are you doing just to make sure you're sticking to your guns and not getting dragged down that rabbit hole?
So, a while back when I first started getting into the GP side to be an active syndicator, I went and hired a coach. So I still have this mentor. I also joined a mastermind group. So within that group and with the mentor, I have them reviewing my deals and making sure that I'm not being too aggressive. They've taught me a ton about how to do underwriting and not to do things like we were just saying, right? Deal doesn't really pencil anymore because the price got bid too high. So now maybe I'm just going to say, well, I think I can get more rent, right, in each of my unit renovations. So I'm going to jack up the rent in my pro forma in my spreadsheet and see what happens to the numbers. There's a thing called the reversion cap rate. So, at what price do you think you're going to sell at the end? And that makes a big difference in how much money you're making, overall in the project. A lot of people do not push that cap rate up very much over time, if at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing I just refuse to touch. We have a standard rule, which at a minimum, it's going to be 10 basis points for each year of ownership. So for 5 years, it's half of an interest point or half a percentage. That's sort of the minimum. We generally go a bit higher than that. And there's a lot of other things in underwriting that we want to make sure that we do as well to keep that conservative approach.
Yeah. Well, especially at this stage of the market cycle, nobody has a crystal ball, but if you're holding for the next 5 to 7 years, chances are you have to weather some sort of recessionary period, right?
Sure. Yeah. And actually, one point there is one of the things we look for mostly in our projects is that they're value add projects. So meaning we can go in and we can renovate exteriors, renovate interior units, put in amenities, and push the rents up, because these are all traded as a multiple of rents or a multiple of net operating income. And so we don't have to rely on the market to appreciate. We can actually force that appreciation. So when we'll go in maybe at 75, 80% financing, but within a year, we're down where the loan to value, instead of being 75, 80, is now down to 60 or 65. Yeah. Which is very low. So you can weather the storm for years to come and have great cash flow at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And so have you developed any routines or rituals that have helped make you successful?
Yeah. So I was talking about earlier, I had these goals about, how much cash flow I want to generate and getting some deals done and how I wanted to do those deals. So I wrote those down. I had a vision board. I was reviewing those goals on a weekly basis and making sure that my activities outside of my W-2 job were aligned with those things. I was spending time in the areas that were most likely going to help me reach my goals. Since I left my corporate job, I have a lot more time on my hands, where I'm spending more time with the family. I'm also on a board at a local charity that I've been volunteering at for years. So just putting in more time everywhere, but haven't really looked at those goals. And again, I think I purposely set those aside, because when I first left the job, I was like, okay, now I got to do business and I got to grow this business. I got to make sure I can provide for my family. And it was very nerve-wracking to not have that W-2 income just showing up in your bank account every week or every other week. And then I literally had to put the brakes on and just say, just enjoy August. It's just a month, right? Enjoy it, enjoy the kids, and then pick it up again in the fall.
Yeah. And, lots of people, investing, they're still working their job. I'm just wondering, because I've never been in that situation. How do you, inside your brain, separate the two and be able to function when you're basically spinning two plates?
In terms of the W-2 job and...
Yeah, the W-2 and your real estate, because at some point, I would assume that it gets pretty complicated inside your head.
It sure does, yeah. So partly on the real estate side, there's a lot of people out there who are also doing this on the side. So we can set up early morning meetings or late evenings, like 7, 8 o'clock after you've had dinner and the kids are to bed or whatever. So there's a whole community of people who are willing to work in those hours. So it's actually fairly easy to kind of work that way. I did let it creep into my W-2 or my my regular job. During the day, I'd take calls on occasion, and it's okay to take a call once in a while, right? Maybe one call a day or something like that, but it's got to be fairly brief. But at some point, I had to say, okay, when I'm at work, and this is again where I was getting nervous about, am I providing enough value to continue to collect a paycheck from my company, right? I shouldn't be here if I can't answer yes to that question. So I started to say, okay, while I'm at the office, unless it's legitimately a lunch break, I'm going to be 100% focused on work. And when I'm not at the office, I'm not checking email anymore for work. I'm going to be only working on my real estate. And it really helped me focus to make sure that I got the right things done at the right time.
Yeah. And I'm very sure that can also transition to, now real estate versus family life. You can really separate the two and not let real estate creep in when you're spending time with the kids.
Yeah, it's so much easier now without, because, like you said, having two plates spinning, it's a lot. It really weighs on you over time. And I did it for 2 years, really pushing hard to try to grow the business and do everything I had to do. And now it's like such a relief, and you have literally one plate spinning, and it's easy enough to keep it spinning. Again, I do have the benefit of the additional cash flow that I've gained from all of my investments to date. So I don't have that two different inboxes that each have 100 emails in them. I just have one email inbox now, and I don't do a great job of staying on top of it, but I just have one. And so I'm not constantly checking my phone to see like what's blowing up at work or what's blowing up in real estate, because I'm on top of the one thing that I have.
Yeah. Well, let's move over to a Keystone deal. So a deal that made a big impact on you and your business. Is there one that comes to mind?
Well, there's sort of two. The one is the original one where I finally just said, okay, I'm going to go buy a property. And my wife, my kids were like, what? Especially the kids. It was funny because they were pretty young. And they're like, I said, I'm going to go buy this property. And they kind of knew where it was. It's right along their bus route to school. I said, yeah, that big red farmhouse. It's got 3 families living in it. And he's like, you're going to be the boss of them? Like, it's not quite that. But it was just this whole transition for all of us. But that's what kind of started everything moving for me. So that's pretty key. Finding out about syndication and doing that first one as a limited partner, that's another sort of key point. And then the first actual syndicated deal, which is really the big one. Finding a partner who lives in San Antonio and with a phenomenal deal, and the two of us took it down together and been working at it ever since. It gave me a lot of credibility with my investors, because that deal has actually performed very well. So my investors now really enjoy the syndicated model. New investors coming in out of the deal saw the performance of that one. So it just kind of puts everything into motion. And the other benefit of this one in particular is we are less than 2 years in. We had an offer last month, which was the 5-year number that we wanted for that deal. It came in less than 2 years. So now we're looking to sell. We're under contract. Their earnest money just went non-refundable last week. So it looks like we're actually going to sell and make substantial profit.
Yeah. And I'm sure the investors do their happy dance when they get all the money back after 2 years.
Yeah. It's funny. The only reaction I've gotten via email, and even when I speak to people, is, well, where's the next deal? Where are we going to put the money? I'm not seeing the happy dance yet, but I'm sure it's there underneath the surface. Yeah,
for sure. So walk us through how you sourced the property, because 2 years ago, the market was still pretty hot. Well, it still is really hot in Texas. Did you get it through a broker, through direct to seller?
So I mentioned I joined a mastermind group. One of the reasons for joining that group is because, again, I live in Boston. This is not a good market for syndication in general. It's not really a great cash flow market. So I wanted to be in a cash flow market, looking at the Texas markets, looking at a few other areas of the country, and decided I was going to try to build relationships with the people who are already acting as sponsors or syndicators in those markets. I tried building broker relationships in other parts of the country, and again, with the job and with the kids and everything else, I felt like it was too much. They wanted me to fly down there, shake their hands, and that is the right way to do it. I don't think there's really any way around that. And I said, even if I do all of those things, I'm still competing with the guy who probably went to high school with that broker or married his sister or whatever, right? So it's going to be hard for me to compete with the person who's already buying all of the best deals in the market, because the broker has just sent it to him because he already has the performance and the track record. So I decided I was going to spend most of my time building those relationships with the people in the market, and to offer what I can offer from here, which is underwriting, helping with asset management, doing due diligence. There's so many different components of making these deals successful, raising capital. So I offered those things, and fortunately, there were enough people that were interested, and now I have a handful of partners that I do deals with, and a few other folks that I'd like to do deals with.
Yeah. And what was it about the San Antonio deal that really stood out on paper when you first saw it?
It was sort of right up the alley of everything that I've been coached on, which was it has to be a value add deal. Probably best to be in a C market with a C class property that has been mismanaged, and you're going to be able to do the renovations and fix it up and get higher rents. And then we had sort of a threshold of returns, and I won't use specific numbers here, but we wanted to make sure it was going to be profitable for everybody and worth our time, and it was. And even looking at those numbers, we knew that we would be able to exceed those. So we came in at a certain level knowing that we were going to overperform anyway. So just all of those, it kind of checked all those boxes. The best part was we showed up on site, and this thing was looking really good on paper at 106 units. We showed up on site and realized that we could actually add 24 units.
Nice.
And it was a very simple add because what they had done is combine 24 of the units into 24 units that were, it was actually up and down. So they had eliminated 24 units, and all we had to do is basically add a kitchen, and it would be 24 more again. So the cash flow numbers went through the roof. The returns went through the roof within like a minute of us being on site. We're like, oh my God, this is amazing. So again, very fortunate, very blessed to have that home run right out of the gate.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned you did some renovations. Were there any hiccups on your end being the first time on the general partner side?
Nothing on that property. No dead bodies when we took over. We didn't find any like crazy stuff. To date, we haven't, on any of my properties, I think we've done a good job of due diligence, and we haven't uncovered anything ridiculous. On occasion, there are things that go wrong. Actually, I'll give you an example on a different property. We knew that there were some building permits that were being requested, right? So there was other builders who were going to come in and build multifamily. And, it was a sort of a slow process. And then finally there was one that got their permits, they built. 2 years later, units are ready to go, and they've literally cut rents in half. And so we're having a tough time now leasing anything that we have in terms of vacancy until they get filled up. So they just finished now. So they're now at the market rents. They've completely filled their units, and they're cash flowing, so they're happy. There will always be competition, but that really steep competition for like a few months period was really painful. And it did, it hurts our numbers. So our distributions were kind of low for that quarter. But now we know that, again, we're back to operating as we were in the past. It was, one tough quarter. It wasn't negative or anything, but it just wasn't quite where we wanted it to be.
Yeah. Actually, I'm really glad you brought up that point, because lots of people, especially if they're new, they don't take into account the absorption rate of units and the potential changes in absorption rate going down the road. So that's a great example for sure.
No, that's another thing we even look at when we're talking with the property management companies or the contractors that we're using. How many units can you renovate in 1 month? And they'll say, we can do 10 or we can do a dozen. But in our pro forma, we'll say, let's only do 5, because we still have to rent those out, right? We still have to make sure that the market is going to absorb those units. So if at 5 per month, we can meet our numbers and everybody's happy in terms of, again, pro forma projections on returns, then we do the deal assuming that that's what we're going to do. Of course, once we actually go to market, we're pushing rents higher than we thought or higher than we projected. And we're doing 7, 8, 9 turns per month if we can.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's like you always want to, be super conservative, but then always outperform, overperform on the actual execution for sure. Yeah.
Right.
So since you've been able to get into real estate, move from doing the duplexes, the triplex to passive, now to the GP side, what sort of impact has real estate had on your family?
Me personally, one of the big things was I was mentioning earlier with the corporate job, I had a lot of sort of fear and uncertainty about, will I have enough to retire ever, right? Retirement age for us is like 67.
Yeah.
It keeps getting older. But I was like, I don't know if I'll even have enough to retire on then, given the way the stock market's performing and, the expectations of returns are lower now than they have been in the past. So I no longer have any of that or the fear part of it, because I'm generating cash flow. I'm sort of my own boss. I can work a bit harder if I want to have more passive income, but I've already generated a lot of passive income that I'm partly living on at this point. And I know that the ability to generate more is right there. It's there for the taking. So the optimism, the abundance mindset that I now have compared to then is enormous. And then for the family, I'm home all the time. I'm around, right? I can drive my kids to school. I can, stop in the middle of the day and hang out with them if I want when they come home from school. Or I can quit working at 4:00 and I literally just walk out of my office and I'm in the kitchen.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and especially like my little guy is almost 3. I'm just worried, once he hits high school, he won't want to hang out with me.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, there's that. It happens.
Yeah, for sure. So let's look ahead 10 years from now. Where do you see yourself and your business going in a decade?
That's something that I need to work on. So I've got my personal goals, which is absolutely no debt. So I got to get my kids through college and pay off the mortgage on the house and those sort of personal things, but not so much around the business. I could probably translate how much business do I need to do to get there. But in terms of do I want to 10x my business? Do I want to buy 1,000 units a year? That sort of thing I've not really put a ton of time into. And part of it is I know folks who have goals, like I'm going to buy 1,000 units in 2019. And I'm like, it's a pretty tight market right now. And that sort of goal, especially if you're writing it down every day, you may actually achieve it. But is this really the right environment to be buying 1,000 units? So, and God bless them if they do and they do it right, they're probably going to be great. I just want to focus more on, I've done a bunch of deals. I did it part-time. Now I have the time to really focus on what have I done? Do I have the right systems in place? Am I really following up the property management companies properly around their metrics, their systems, their policies? I want to ensure that everything I've done so far that I can deliver on and that it's all really rock solid. And that's going to be my focus for the rest of this year. And if I do 2-3 deals a year, I would probably be fine. I'll probably also be bored. I feel like, by the time January comes along, I'll be setting much larger goals. I just don't want to do it yet.
Yeah, that's totally fair enough. So Steve, if somebody's looking to reach out, learn more about you and your business, check out the deals you're doing, where can they find you?
Best way is to go to my website, which is the name of the company is Velocity Capital. The website is velocitycap.com.
Perfect. That's awesome. Well, Steve, just want to say thanks so much for taking the time today, sharing some really good stories and some good advice.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, the pleasure was all mine. And to you, our reviewers, I wish you well on your journey from purchase to profits. See you next time.